chapter 3, verse 1, remind them to be submissive to rulers and authorities, to be obedient, to be ready for every good work. First, healthy preparation for good work. Healthy preparation for good works, that they are to be submissive to rulers and authorities, to be obedient, and to be ready for every good work. They're to prepare themselves for good work. They're to be ready for it. And part of that is those first two instructions, to be submissive to rulers and authorities, and to be obedient. That they would be those who are looking for an opportunity to serve. And how do they look for such an opportunity? Well, they're looking to obey rather than disobey. They're not looking at what they can get away with. They're looking at what they should do and what they're called to. And we often don't think this way when we think of submissive to rulers and authorities. As Paul instructs many times that Christians are to be those who submit to authority, our heart's prone to hear that and we think, wait, aren't there times we don't submit? Let that be a heart check for us. When you hear a command of Christ, is your first question when you don't have to obey that command? Or is your first question, how can I obey that command? If you want to train yourself for godliness, it would start with training yourself healthily in self-control to fight that when God says, this is what you ought to do, or this is what you must do, you say, how can I do that? How can I live that out? Yes, we understand that we cannot live perfectly, but we can live far more obediently because of the grace of God. That's what he's going to promise us here of what he's done. We're not there yet. But first, submission to rulers and authorities. This is just Christian truth. You know me. If you're part of Faith Bible, you know I want to preach a whole sermon on submission to government right now. Submission to authorities, and the importance of that, the necessity as we want to declare the authority of God. We cannot tear down the authority structures that he has left on earth. We want to be those who honor authority. We're to do so to be obedient, to be those who are looking to obey, looking for opportunity to obey. And why? That we might be ready for every good work, that we might be looking for the opportunity to glorify God. Look with me real quick at the book of 1 Peter. 1 Peter chapter 2, starting at verse 13, he says, "Be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether it be to the emperor supreme or to governors as sent by him to punish those who do evil and to praise those who do good. For this is the will of God, that by doing good you should put to silence the ignorance of foolish people. Live as people who are free, not using your freedom as a covering for evil, but living as servants of God." So he says we are to be subject for God's sake to every human institution. Whether it's the emperor supreme, so this is a tyrant, or to governors, as those lower authorities under the tyrant at the time, that are to punish those who do evil and to praise those who do good under the authority of the emperor. And he says, for this is the will of God, that by doing good, you should put to silence the ignorant of foolish people. Not through rebellion, but through faithfulness despite the injustice of someone else, you are pointing out the faithfulness of God. Christ did not fail in submitting to the Roman government or submitting to Jewish leaders and going to the cross. Acts would tell us that he did what God had predestined as they did what they desired, Herod and Pontius Pilate and the Jewish leaders. And through it all, what is shown? The enduring, faithful power of God as Jesus resurrects. And he says his people should live in the same way, not using their freedom in Christ as a covering for evil. Don't take your liberty and say, I have liberty in Christ, I can do whatever I want. He says, think about your liberty in Christ and use it as what? Living as a servant, or a better translation there would be living as a slave of God. You are free to enslave yourself to the desires of God, to live for God's glory. And I know many people might hear me say that and think, what an evil God. But Christian, I know you hear that and you think, what a great God. If I'm going to be a slave to anything, He is the one I long to be a slave to. And you know, as a Christian, you will be enslaved to something. Either your passions, your ungodliness, or to His goodness and His kindness and His endurance and faithfulness. A slave of the gospel or a slave of sin. I know which one, Christian, you long to be a slave to. And it's encouraging that Paul says here to remind them. He says as Christians, we need reminders. Remind them to be submissive to rulers and authority. Maybe your heart has not been there. Take this time to be trained for godliness, to be reminded of what you need.